P&R with Adam R. Welcome to 3P&R. I'm your host, Adam R. Joining me again for this episode is Cloyd Steiger, Homicide Detective. Cloyd, how you doing, sir?
I'm good, thanks.
Glad to have you on. Glad to have your time. We were talking in pre-podcast. A lot of craziness going around the country right now.
Yeah, there is.
I just don't like there's not a lot to be said about the Idaho killing. I'm a little confused by the motive of this person. And it just seems like, I don't know, it's strange that in that house there were other people. Right. And I know one of these people had to let a scream or something. And even one girl's alleged to see the guy leaving. I don't know. That's a really strange case.
Yeah, it is. But, you don't know what that one person that saw it, what their, how sober they were. They could have been out drinking all night and not perceive things correctly. And, there's all these variables that people don't think of that are in the mix here.
Yeah. I started watching that show on Netflix called Mindhunter. You seen it?
No. I know it'll shock you, but I don't watch that shit.
Yeah. That show screwed me up a little bit because I guess it's based on the FBI trying to, develop the program for, screening and setting up profiles to, I guess, forecast serial killers. And that's just, I didn't realize that was a real story till about, I don't know, like maybe I was like 5 episodes in. I was like, wow, this is based on real shit.
Yeah, it is. Although, I think the accuracy and value of it is way overplayed in the media. It's just something to consider. It's not, they're wrong. And I have friends that did this and do this or have done this in the past, and they're wrong as much as they're right.
Right.
But they're just giving a general idea.
Yeah, especially with this the Wayne Williams guy. I really, really thought that was a fictional character. I really believe that.
No. I actually have a friend who's a forensic psychiatrist who was one of the people consulted on the Wayne Williams case, and he has a lot of opinions about this. And he would pretty much accurately determine what was going on, but he was involved in that case. He was involved in Bundy. He was involved in a lot of other cases. He's a psychiatrist out of Scottsdale, Arizona, and we chat by email almost every day.
Man. Yeah, that guy bothered me because if they're portraying him correctly in the show, and you'll have to, I don't want to spoil it for you if you haven't seen it.
Okay.
But, he did something in that show that I seen in, I think it was Goodfellas, where he brings the cops food because he figured out they were tailing him. So he brings them some food. I was shocked when I saw that.
That happened with Bundy too. Because I have friends who tailed Bundy. And they say he always walked up to him and said, "Hey, in case you lose me, this is where I'm going next."
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what majority of these previous serial killers are pretty, like they see, or what they appear anyway in these programs, is that they're really intelligent.
Yeah, I think they appear. These programs have a tendency to make them look a little more intelligent than they actually are. I mean, they didn't get away with it, right? In the end, they all get caught. So that's what we got to consider. I mean, they were. They're not stupid, some of them. Some of them are stupid, like Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. His IQ level was like 80. He was stupid.
Right.
But some of the others, Bundy wasn't stupid. Wayne Williams wasn't stupid. And some of the others, it's a cross-section of society.
Yeah, I wonder how many of them, like some people get confused. They say, like, maybe they're really intelligent. Perhaps maybe they're just really paranoid and they're very observant.
Well, it's kind of a little of both, I think.
Yeah, it just bothers me that the mindset of somebody like they kept the brain. I forget which one it was. They kept someone's brain of a serial killer after execution,
right?
For study.
Yeah.
And I never really understood what that was going to, what they're going to find in that.
Yeah, I don't think it's physiological. It's psychological. So you can't find that looking at the brain.
Right.
I mean, you can always try, just to settle your own curiosity, but it's not a physiological thing going on where you're going to be able to observe. Oh, wait, look, you can tell because of the way this cortex is formed. He's a serial killer. It's not that simple.
Yeah, and there's another program out too about Dahmer that's I think on Hulu. I haven't watched that. I don't know how I feel. Dahmer's story is disturbing, and when I first found out about it as a kid, and even now, it's disturbing. I don't know how much would I want to. And so there's a lot of blowback from people about this guy winning an award for playing a part of Dahmer.
Right. Well, people don't realize. They think, oh my God, he was a cannibal. How weird and how unusual. Bundy did some cannibalism, and so did Arthur Shawcross, the Genesee River Killer in Rochester, New York. A lot of these guys experiment with that, and Dahmer wasn't so unique. It's just that he was the first one that was out in the open that he did that stuff.
Right, and especially with, I guess, keeping body parts and putting stuff into a marinade. I mean, that's
Bundy kept body parts. He kept the head of a victim in his freezer for a long time. And one of his Seattle victims or Seattle area victims, and then a couple weeks or months later returned it out and dumped it on the shoulder of a highway. So I mean, it's not unusual. These people are not. They don't think and act like you and I do, right? They have different things going on.
Yeah, their mindsets, it's completely altered from what normal is. Like to them, I watched the interview with Bundy, and the disturbing part about that was his demeanor through the whole thing. It was like Monday morning meeting for him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, because that's what it is. It's just he just casually talks about it, and of course, he never directly says he does stuff. He talks in the third person or speculation, but he's talking about himself.
Right. Yeah, it's creepy. I don't know. Like, so for you in working in homicide in the years you've worked it, and so for some of the future guys, it might be easier because of forensic technology has increased. I think for a serial killer to be successful in our day and age, they would have to have a strong knowing of forensic science. They would have to be methodical of the things they do. It's not like it once upon a time was.
Yeah, you'll never see the numbers that used to be because they would be caught way before that. Because even no matter how much you know and how methodical you are, you're going to make mistakes, and that's going to show up, right? You can't completely control every situation. So you'll never see the numbers that you saw in Bundy, that you saw in Green River, that you saw in other serial killers around the country, because they'll be caught forensically before that.
Right. Yeah, and then there's the other question. What are these people? Like, I'm not kidding, Cloyd, there's women that send these killers like proposals for marriage, and they're upset. No. What is that?
Well, that's a whole nother issue of study, another psychological thing. And it happens all the time. And I'm not sure, I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist to know what's going on with these women, but they're needy.
Yeah, man. For the first time you and I had spoken, I took the time to do a little more study, watch a few more documentaries. And one in particular, you have that Night Stalker guy. And there's literally people in the courtroom, like these girls are obsessed with them. There's guys that are dressing like them. I can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah, Richard Ramirez. Yeah, it's incredible. It's just, like I said, you could do a whole nother study on just the women that glom onto these serial killers. Maybe they're looking for somebody they can have a relationship with and they don't have to deal with every day, because that's going to be the case, right?
It's true.
Little do they know, they express their love for them, but if they had to check it, they'd kill them in an instant.
Right.
For yeah. There's something going on with these women, with these serial killers. I don't understand it myself.
So what are the cases from the past that caught your attention? What are the ones that stand out to you?
No, my cases,
and just any case from the past that you know of that caught your attention.
There's a lot of them. You got not my cases. You got Kenneth Bianchi, who was one of the Hillside Stranglers, and he killed with his cousin Angelo Buono down in L.A., and then he moved up to Bellingham, Washington, about 130 miles north of where I am right now. And he actually got on as a reserve deputy at the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office, and he worked for a security company. He duped a couple of teenage girls into going to this house for a security company, saying they were he needed them to watch the house, and he'd pay them. I forgot what the amount was, like $100 an hour, which was ridiculous back when they did it.
Right.
And he went there and he killed them both. Right. And then and they found him in a car not far from the house, and that's what he ultimately got arrested for. And he's in prison in Walla Walla right now. Those type of. It's like, and these girls, of course, here he worked at a grocery chain called Fred Meyer, which is part of the Kroger grocery chain, as a security guy. And these girls were checkers, and he talked them into that. And then he also worked for a residential security company, and they just glommed onto that. Oh yeah, $100 an hour. Yeah, we'll do it. Of course they will, because it's not going to happen. And he killed them both. He strangled them both. And it's just insatiable, the desire to kill from some of these people.
Man, it's something was brought to my attention about 3 weeks ago, and I immediately thought of you when I heard it. Somebody asked me a question. if someone were to be a serial killer and they work in the medical profession, in like trauma units where the likelihood of being deceased is great, there's really no way to figure who that is, right? Because they're not there to murder, right?
Well, yeah, that happens every now and then. There's actually, I think it's a Netflix series right now called The Good Nurse, and there's a fictional, not a fictional, but a dramatization of the facts, and then there's a documentary. It's the same thing. The guy was a nurse. I think it was an ICU nurse. I haven't seen it, but he was killing his patients, and one of the other nurses noticed it, and he finally got caught. That actually happens quite a bit. Not that 99.99999% of nurses are great people that are trying to help their patients, but that 0.01 is the ones you got to look out for because it's so easy to kill and not be detected. And this guy, I don't remember this guy killed, but a lot. And there have been other nurses that have killed people while they're working in ICU or those areas, and nobody suspects anything until they finally get. A lot of them get caught though in the end, but still, at that point, you've got 40, 50, 60 victims.
Right. Yeah, because some people are terminal, some people are, and it's
exactly, and nobody even blinks that they died because they were in such bad shape.
That freaks me out. That really freaks me out because I never thought I only thought of it because he brought it to my attention. I think it's the same show you're talking about. I said you should watch his show. I'm like, all right, well, I'll check it out.
Yeah,
and
it's kind of the Florence Nightingale syndrome, except for these people are killing. Yeah, that's the thing because it's so easy and it gives them such power, and it's such perception of power anyway. And it's a bad deal, and it's easier to get away with it. I'm sure there have been several that have been caught, but I'll bet you for everyone that's been caught, there's 2 or 3 that got away with it.
Yeah, I mean, because some of the serial killers you read about in history, they seem to be, and especially when you watch Mindhunter, a lot of them are sexually driven. It's some sort of desire and a fantasy where some killers just like seeing the lights go out, and they don't care how it happens, which makes sense for it being in the medical field. That makes prime sense.
Absolutely.
It's a scary thought, Cloyd. You know what I mean? So I did an episode with Norm Pardo, and he's the guy who did the film about O.J. Simpson and followed him closely. And long story short, I was till Norm Pardo, and I watched his documentary. I was unaware that Glenn Rogers was in the picture with Nicole and O.J. under another name. In fact, he was there under the name of a man he had killed. Right? He had taken his identity and was essentially introduced to Nicole for painting her house. And so, and when you hear this, and then, you look at OJ and Ron Goldman, whoever his assailant was, Ron put a fight up. But Ron was a big guy. He wasn't a little dude, man. He's like 6'2" or something like that, worked out. He took martial arts. He fought his assailant hard. And so when you see OJ and this guy's got like maybe a cut on his finger and no abrasions on his face, I don't know, man. I think I'm starting to lean in the idea that OJ was there to confront Nicole for whatever drug issue that was alleged. And then when Ron and this got into the picture and it became like a physical thing, I think OJ left. And the only real guilt OJ bears is that these 2 people were killed by this guy that would never happen if this guy wasn't in the mix, right? So OJ bears that guilt. There's a lot of craziness in that case.
Except, the problem is OJ cut himself during this, and he left his DNA.
Right.
And despite what the defense said, and actually one of my friends was a prosecutor in the OJ case. He is a DNA expert, and despite it was jury nullification, that's what caused that case.
Right.
There's no doubt in my mind that OJ killed these people. I've been to the condo actually and looked, and it's so much smaller than you picture in your mind, and it's just, it's not a close deal. I don't know about anybody else being there, maybe, but
yeah,
I don't have any doubt in my mind that OJ is the guy that did that.
Undoubtedly, OJ had some conflict with Ron on scene, but it's what I think OJ got injured. He got cut on the finger. I think OJ's like, all right, forget this, I'm leaving, and leaves this Glenn Rogers guy. When you look at who Glenn Rogers is, he was caught later on. He was a serial killer. He was traveling and murdering people, and the way Nicole was killed and some of the other victims, the only thing that separates them is that he had time to clean up the other victims. He didn't have time to clean up Nicole. So the whole thing's baffling to me.
Yeah. You have to look at why would he pick Nicole, right? Who was she to him?
Right.
Yeah. You got to look at the probabilities.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about this guy, but the guy who had the motive to kill her was OJ. And, the civil jury found that was true, but It was just jury nullification. They had his. How did he cut himself? Right? He cut himself because he
Ron had a pocket knife on him. Is what I was
slipped. It got slippery. That happens all the time.
Yeah.
The other thing that people don't realize is that when they went back to his house and searched his bathroom, there was a knife box of the type of knife used in this homicide sitting on his bathroom vanity, open with no knife.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, those are things that they didn't use it, and I don't know why in the world they would use that in the trial, but they didn't. And so anyway, it's not.
That is one of the most mysterious cases I've ever read about, because in truth, and this is fact, when you look up the public records, everything's sealed and redacted. I was shocked. I was like, the only thing I've ever seen sealed or redacted like that was anything pertaining to JFK. It's crazy.
I actually was at a conference with one of the lead detectives in the OJ case, and we were having drinks in the bar, and he was a nanosecond from getting OJ to confess to this case, and he shut the thing down. And I said, "Why did you do that?" Because you treated him different than everybody else, and that's the first mistake he made.
Yeah,
you got to treat everybody exactly the same, because that would have saved a lot of heartache. Although everybody involved in the OJ case ended up getting millionaires, right? They all profited from it, but
yeah, you're right. Every one of them, prosecutors, the detectives, everyone.
Detective justice was not done in that case. There's no doubt about that.
No, yeah. There's another case too that I just really recently started looking into, and I'm going to try to. There's a guy on TV. I'm going to try to find this detective that's working on it. It's John Benet Ramsey.
Oh yeah, I've been to that house too.
Yeah, tell me.
Boulder on a case. You want to go to John Benet Ramsey house? Yeah. So we went over there.
What's your?
And that's a lot smaller than I thought too.
Yeah, because in the video it looks enormous.
But it's not. It's just a house on a street. It's actually on the same street as like all the frats and stuff on near University of Colorado, and it's just from the street it looks like a regular house. It's not at all as big as I pictured in my mind. Huh. That's the thing about these cases, unless you've been there in person, you always picture something and it's usually wrong.
What are your thoughts on that case? Like, if you were investigating, what would you think?
Well, the thing about that case is nobody knew who John Benet Ramsey was until she was murdered. So when this guy several years ago came forward and confessed to the murder, a friend of mine who was actually my kid's junior high football and wrestling coach, and I become friends with him, he called me up, "Hey, can you believe they got the guy that did it?" And his name was Frank. I said, "Frank, listen." He goes, "What?" "He's not the guy." He goes, "What?" "He's not the guy." And then later they found out he wasn't the guy. And he goes, you knew it, because he had tried to confess to Polly Klaas and other high-profile cases. Nobody knew who John Benet Ramsey was until she was murdered. Right? There was no motive. So it's somebody in the family. I don't think somebody in the family probably did it by accident, and then the rest of the family covered up because they didn't want to lose another member of the family. They already lost her. They didn't want to lose whoever it was, and so that's what happened. And now today with technology and the MVAC DNA collection system, you can go back and do that and find out if there's any foreign DNA on there that isn't a family member. I guarantee you they're going to find there wasn't. But that's what you do. You go back and you do it. Now the finding DNA of a family member on her clothing, whatever, isn't enough to convict, because it could be there innocently, right? Anybody could have touched her. But the absence of an outside DNA is evidence it's not an outside killer. So that's what I think they need to do. Yeah,
the MVAC too. I had the guy in the show that Jared Bradley.
Jared Bradley. Yeah.
Yeah, I had him on the show. I'm actually I'm going to reach out to him again, because that MVAC, I predict that's going to become a part of every forensics team.
It needs to be, because it's one of there have been several big breakthroughs in forensics last year. MVAC is one, genealogy is another, and then the sensitivity of DNA testing is another. But you can get stuff off with an MVAC for DNA that you could never get before, whether it's the sticky sided tape, a rock, a brick, or anything. If they don't have to have blood or semen or anything like you used to have. They just need to have touched it. It only takes a couple cells, and you can expand those and narrow it down and get a DNA profile. And what you're looking for, like in the John Benet Ramsey case, is one that's not in the family. And if you find that one, and it's not in CODIS, which is the National DNA Data Bank, then you do genealogy and you find out who it belongs to. But I guarantee you, they will not find any DNA on her clothing that isn't from the family.
Right.
And so they told you it's somebody in the family.
Yeah.
But the DNA alone is not enough because they could have innocently touched her.
There's something bizarre about that case, too.
It was very bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I knew that case was bad. I remember when it happened, and it was like almost Christmas.
Right.
And the news reported that the Boulder Police Department has its first murder of whatever year it was on Christmas. And I thought, yeah, they're over their heads. If they're getting their first murder at Christmas, almost the end of the year, who knows when their last murder was, probably 2 or 3 years before. They need someone outside who knows what they're doing to help. Just kind of like Idaho did. Idaho didn't have, this was way over Moscow, Idaho Police Department's head, but they called for help right away. And, right. The detectives in Boulder, I don't mean to sound bad, but they screwed that case up from the beginning. The way they handled everything was bad. It's not unrecoverable, but they screwed it up from the beginning.
Yeah, they didn't clean for one, they had the family just walking around the crime scene.
Yeah, that's one thing. That's a big thing. And then they didn't control the scene. They didn't know what they're doing. They didn't preserve evidence like they should have. And yeah, it was terrible. I mean, it's just so many things wrong. And it's not, they're just an agency that doesn't handle a lot of these cases. And it's great if you live in Boulder, Colorado, to not have many murders there, right?
Right, yeah.
But if you're the police department and something like this happens, you need to call for help for people that handle this kind of stuff and know what they're doing. And they didn't do that in this case, and they've screwed it up. And I used to think it was beyond repair, but now with all the DNA advancements, I think they can probably at least narrow down to a family member.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of parts to that is they instructed the father to search the house. I think at this point,
what is up with that?
Yeah, like at this point, the kid's only missing. But even then, you don't instruct the father to do the search.
The police do it, right? And of course, he finds her downstairs. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah, that's bizarre. And then carries her.
I used to have a thing I would say about this. Whenever these agencies had these cases, I used to say, pretend you've done this before. Okay?
Yeah.
Pretend this isn't the first time you've ever dealt with anything like this. But if it is, ask for help. And that's the problem. They didn't.
Yeah, the other thing, too, is the Boulder police, they're not released. So there's a new forensic DNA analyst. Her name's Cece. I was reading about
I know Cece Moore, yeah. Cece Moore.
Really good at what she does. And they're just not releasing the DNA to her.
Right, exactly. She's a genealogist. She tracks a forensic
like a heritage, like it narrows it down to a bloodline. Where she could almost find.
And then you go down the bloodline, and you work your way down. You work your way down the food chain. There's another one that I know who, by the way, if you want to know about Murder, She Wrote, the old woman out solving murders.
Yeah, I remember that.
Genetics is the way they're doing that, because there are people that they're little old ladies that do this, and there was an unidentified remains case, and this geneticist was looking at it, and she says, I can tell you that one of her ancestors came over on the Mayflower. Right? That's how far back they went. Wow. And they worked their way down until they finally identified her. And that's incredible work that they're doing today.
It is remarkable. At some point, when do you think we get to the point like Minority Report, we're forecasting it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, with the Idaho case, my hat's off to them. They did reach out for help. Lenny DePaul consulted on that case, and several other people. Lenny DePaul's been on the show, former U.S. Marshal, former Secret Service, former Navy. I mean, he's had that show, Manhunters, Fugitive Task Force.
Yeah. Well, that's what the marshals do. They're manhunters. Yeah, I use them a lot to go after people I was looking for. Yeah,
right. Yeah, and their success rate's pretty high because they get out there and they dig in
real high. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Well, yeah, but you got to the credit of that agency, they reached out for help, and I don't know, in the 90s, is it? And here's the other thing too. Even in that show I watched, Mindhunters, I saw like this weird division between the FBI and the local law enforcement. And I didn't understand that.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff going on between the FBI and local law enforcement on murder cases. I have a lot of friends that are FBI agents and they're great guys and great investigators, but the FBI is so uber regulated that they just can't do things off the cuff like local officers do. That's why they put these task forces together with local law enforcement so they can do things like make probable cause arrests, because the FBI can't do that. A lot of things the FBI can't do, and they're not experts in murder investigation. I mean, they can do a lot of, like in this case, they provided money to Idaho. They provided surveillance teams, which are very good, to Idaho, and a lot of other that stuff. But TV and the FBI want you to believe they're experts in murder investigation. They're just not.
Right. Yeah. Maybe developing a profile. Yeah. I mean, I could see that. But
right. But even then, they're
right.
It's only so much value, right? You can't take it and their own thing, their own profile things say this is, basically an educated guess. Don't take it for verbatim. But agencies, especially small agencies, they eliminate people because people don't match the profile. You should never do that because they might be wrong. Right. They're not saying they're right all the time, right? They're not claiming they're right all the time. So just use it as something to consider. Don't put all your eggs in that basket.
Yeah, there's a show I recently saw it too. I forgot the name. Terrible of me. Well, the killer in his show was a serial killer, and he was purposely jumping jurisdictions. Right, he would never kill in the same location.
Right.
So at said point, when that happens for local law enforcement, that's what I think when they have to get like the marshals and the FBI involved because of jurisdiction.
Right. Yeah, they set up VICAP, which is a national database for that, which could be good, but it's not. There's not enough people to participate, and they pick and choose which cases they want. If they want it to be successful, they need to choose all murders, have them all coded, put them in there. The unit I used to work for at the Washington State Attorney General's office, HITS, which is Homicide Investigation Tracking System, we tracked every murder in Washington, Oregon, and some of Montana. And so if something came up, it's in a database, and it can pop up that this is similar to a case somewhere else. And that's what VICAP was developed to do. But because of the limit on what they do and the limit on the number of agencies that participate, it doesn't live up to that.
Right.
Washington was 100% compliant with VICAP because the HITS unit put everything in VICAP. But again, they're picking and choosing which cases they should have. And the thing about serial killers or any of these killers is they don't follow the same MO all the time, right?
Right.
Some things look like that fits on this pattern, but although they'll do something out of left field. Well, you need to have that left field case in there too, but they don't. They're picking and choosing the cases they'll take. They should do every case, every murder in the nation, and the agency should all participate to make it a useful system. But so far, it's not there.
Yeah, I agree with you because, there's, like we said, there's some of these killers are intelligent and they acclimate, they adjust and they also evolve. Like I was reading one case where the killer in particular, his desires changed as he progressed. And so the MO did change a bit. That's got to be tough, man.
Yeah. Because, before I was in homicide, I was in sex crimes. And we were getting called to all these boogeyman through the window rapes in Seattle. And they were all done by the same person. And we found that out through DNA. And from the time I started I was only there 2 years before I went to homicide. But all these cases came up. And it was like all this stuff. And we're looking for and he did the same thing. He said the same phrases. He tied them up with phone cords. He did everything. Well, then, just as I was leaving to go to homicide, there was a rape or a sexual assault. It wasn't necessarily a rape. That was completely different from this. Absolutely not even close. But the detective put the DNA in, and they said, that's the same guy that's doing all those other cases. And it's like, what? It's completely different. It was because he changed his MO. And that's how they got him. Because the DNA showed it was the same guy, even though the MO and the way he did things was completely different. It wasn't even close to all the other cases.
And it's scary because you can't have a singular mindset with this. Definitely not. Because the killers, again, they're like, I guess to put it this way, they're like roaches. Roaches adapt. They adapt rapidly.
They do adapt, and they're exactly like roaches. They are roaches. Right. They adapt, right?
There's a study.
They scurry somewhere else. That's exactly right. That's a good analogy.
Yeah, because think of it. There's a study where roaches, they were using sugar-based traps to poison them. And when literally the roaches became aware that's what's happening, and they all together changed their diet. That's crazy, So
yeah.
And that's the instincts of a roach. Now imagine a very sentient, intelligent murderer. Of course he's going to adapt. So,
Of course. And that's what they do.
Let me ask you, in your opinion, because I've been reading about this too, and I don't know where I'm at with it. The Zodiac Killer. This guy's all over the place. And my instincts tell me that there's more than one. There has to be like 3 of them. I'm not saying copycat, or maybe they're in communication, but one way or the other. The timeline, the evolution of the letters, the evolution of the way that their murders were committed, the location, just all about it. I'm blown away. I'm absolutely blown away by that case. I can't. I'm pretty good about wrapping my head around one generalized suspect. This one, no idea.
Well, the thing about the Zodiac, and I'm not an expert in the Zodiac killing, but I'm sure that there is one main guy and there are other copycats.
Right.
I was reviewing a case as part of a cold case group that happened in Pennsylvania in the 90s, and this elderly woman was murdered, and she had a symbol carved in her back postmortem of an image, and I was looking at, what the hell is this image? And I was looking and looking and looking. It wasn't until a couple of years ago I realized that was the Zodiac Killer image, right? It was the thing he drew, and so I thought, but that guy was a copycat. I don't believe that the Zodiac Killer was in Pennsylvania when he was mostly in California. So, I mean, that's a case that's solvable too. Just go back and look at all this evidence, MVAC some of this stuff, and see what's going on. But like I said, you're right. There are a base of cases that were by the true Zodiac Killer. The others, I believe, are copycats trying to kill somebody and get away with it by trying to make it look like the Zodiac Killer did it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's perfect. In the killer's eyes, like, well, this Zodiac guy is famous. I could pull this off. All I really have to do is this, and they're going to look in the wrong direction.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, murderers and criminals at large are opportunists at the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's really what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so that being said, like you said earlier, we can't treat every case, identically to some profile. They are going to evolve, and there's going to be some that are going to use opportunity. Like I just watched that Mindhunter show. The Wayne Williams guy, granted he's responsible for some of those murders. Undoubtedly, some other pedophiles or other killers out there were involved because they realized the main focus was on one individual. Right.
And I have no doubt that he wasn't convicted of all the cases. And I have no doubt that some of those cases were copycat cases that are hiding under his banner, basically.
Right.
I believe he was guilty of the ones he was convicted of. But you're right. There are some that just they copied him and tried to hide their own crimes, and that happens anytime there's high profile crimes. That's one of the things you have to, as an investigator, you gotta watch out for.
Yeah, because even in that, so the show didn't really go to great lengths to depict. There was these 2 other gentlemen in the area, and they were taking inappropriate photos of children, and they were somewhat known pedophiles. And their accountability on the nights in question there was just nothing. They didn't, because I read more into the case after watching the show. I was like, there's got to be more to it than just that. They can't, there's no way they're going to leave it at this. And when I read about it, they had no alibis. One of the guys were really, really old, but these are children, right? And who knows what method he used to subdue them. So it's scary. It's a scary thought.
One of the things about the Atlanta child murderers is they were in the Black community, and at the time people thought it was white supremacists coming in and doing this, but it had to be somebody who could walk among the Black community and not be noticed.
Right.
So that tells you it's another Black, right? He wouldn't be noticed. Nobody's thinking a white guy going through this stuff. He would have stuck out like a sore thumb. Now, again, not to say that Wayne Williams committed all the crimes that have been attributed to the Atlanta child murders, but he committed the ones he was convicted of. And people could have done things, again, copycat crimes using him as basically camouflage. And that probably did happen.
Right. It makes me wonder if they put any kind of pressure on his parents to speak about his habits, because his father in the show was alleged to go charter a flight for him through a private airplane company to go to South America. And when I looked that up on record, something like that did happen. So it makes me believe that either he was really, really good at lying and convinced his father that I'm innocent and they're setting me up for this, or the father might know more.
Yeah, it could be either one of those, and I tend to believe a little bit to the latter.
Right.
I mean, your kid's accused of this, you know he's going to be sent away forever, if not given the death penalty, and you're torn, but you want to protect your kid, and that's what happened. But Wayne Williams was on the bridge and dropped a body off the bridge, and he was seen under surveillance with his lights out, and then stopped, and it was him.
Right.
And then a couple of days later, they found the body a little bit downstream. So that's pretty solid, and so I have no doubt that he's guilty of the crimes he's convicted of.
Yeah, undoubtedly.
Does that mean there are some that he didn't do that are attributed to him? Yeah, possibly. I'll go with that.
Because I looked up some of the transcripts from his interviews, and he was very he liked the idea that he was in full control and he was manipulating the police. He loved that.
That's exactly and that's typical of these guys. They're smarter than the police. They can tell them anything they want, and that's the way this happens. That's so that type of stuff is normal. But you use that as a detective. You use that to your advantage to trap them and let them think they're outsmarting you when really they're not.
Right. Discredit them too. Like, I don't know if you had the Constitution to do some of these crimes, and kind of jolt their ego a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. It's
like I said, I'm sure there are some that are attributed to him he was not convicted of that he did not do. I'm sure that's true, but the ones he was convicted of, I have no doubt he did.
So there's a lot of cases across the country that are unsolved. A lot. I mean,
Right.
high profile ones, especially. I mean, although like the Biggie and Tupac thing, we have a good idea who did that. We have a good idea who orchestrated it, but there's a lot of other unsolved cases. And so for a homicide detective, when a case is unsolved, what does that do to you for the length of your life?
Well, it means a lot. It's a lot different today than it was 20 years ago, right?
Right.
Today, you go back and you pull that case off the case file, or the shelf, you dust it off, and you start going through it again, and you submit the evidence for evidence again, because the stuff they could do 20 years ago is 1/10 of what they can do today, and so you just do it, and that's how these cold cases are solved.
Yeah, I'm going to start looking into cold cases more, right? Because I've even read about a case where a group of like these online sleuths were the ones to figure out what it was who the killer was, and they submitted the information based on the internet research. So it's funny to me because these people that sit at home and they watch these and they check every detail of the case and they come with a little bit of an answer. So how often is it in homicide? Do you have an outside entity like like somebody who just does research into it that they reach out to because it can help solve cases?
Well, it's never happened to me, but I'm sure it does happen, because the thing you got to realize is these agencies, most of them have no time to look at cold cases because they're busy with new cases coming in.
Right.
And so unless they have a dedicated cold case unit, it's just shoveling back the time. Because, I remember when I was a young homicide detective, starting my first 2 or 3 years, I would pull up these cold cases and say, I'll work on these in my spare time. The problem is I had no spare time, right? I was constantly working on new murders. So, and then finally, Seattle got a dedicated cold case unit, and I would go to them and say, you need to look at this case because this is solvable. And most of them were solved later by just somebody having to be able to spend full-time looking at this case. But in reality is most of these agencies don't have that time because there's too many new murders going on, and they're busy every day.
Yeah, especially in I was surprised too, watching that show, again, to refer to the show. I was unaware that the murder rate in Atlanta was as high as it was in that area.
Oh, it's right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I always thought New York, LA, Detroit, but Atlanta was.
Atlanta, Baltimore, which is a city about the same size as Seattle, but has 10 times the number of murders, right? But Seattle, I had people I deal with in other agencies. They go, you guys don't have that many murders. I said, we don't have quantity, but we have quality because we had weird, kinky murders and stuff. And most of those guys are, gangbanger. One shoots gangbanger too, which is true. But, Baltimore, Atlanta, Chicago, they have incredible numbers. New Orleans, a city of 380,000 or 400,000, has so many murders. But most of them are gang murders and that type of thing.
Right. Yeah. They even, about Baltimore, they even made a show to address it because it was so out of control that they want to drive some attention there. They made a show called The Wire.
Yeah,
it was that bad.
Yeah.
It was really that bad there that they had to kind of draw some attention to it. It's crazy.
Yeah. Baltimore was and still is out of control.
It's bizarre. That's bizarre. How do you fix that? How does that fixed?
Well, you need to look at the root causes, and we can get into the whole sociological reason and single mother families, and taking responsibility for your kids and all that stuff, and discipline your kids and love your kids. That's at the root of it. But that's a big, as a homicide detective, you can't deal with that. You have to deal with the end result, and that's
right.
They're killing people, and you have to deal with it.
Yeah, that's a whole other form, right? That's at a political level, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So here's another big one too. And I noticed it maybe, I don't know if it stems from the pandemic and, just that's the aftermath of it, but a lot of these mass shootings were taking place. And I was struggling to understand why. The only thing I could think is that the pressures from, we had the pandemic, people are locked up, they might lose their control. Not to mention, we've both seen the last couple of years this crazy inflation on like rent and food and gas, and there's no inflation on people's pay, so they're probably snapping, is what I thought. But you can't attribute all of that to that.
No, and the thing is with these mass shootings is sometimes people are just no damn good, right? They're just evil, and whatever caused them to be evil is another issue altogether. But I've investigated or taken place in investigation on several mass shootings where multiple people were killed in one incident. And most of the time, the killer ends up being dead at the end. Not all the time.
Right.
But, you just say, what the hell are you thinking? They're not thinking, right? It's just because sometimes people are no damn good. There's evil in the world, and we have to contain it. Well, part of the problem is there's the mental health system in this nation is broken. I was involved in a case called Cafe Racer in Seattle. I don't remember what year it was. This guy walked into a bar and shot everybody in there, basically. And then he went downtown and walked up to a woman, parked a car, and shot her in the head for no reason to steal a car. But he was just psychotic, and his family had been trying for years to get him committed, but there was just the laws just weren't there for it, and he just ended up doing this, and in the end, he killed himself at the end. So I mean, this is again another sociological answer to this. It's not a criminal detective answer because you only deal with the aftermath.
Right.
But it's out of control.
It's disheartening too. When you see it, as many as we've seen in the last couple of years, like I remember being nervous because I was like, this is not just happening in isolated areas. This is pretty spread out.
It could happen anywhere.
Yeah. I don't know. I tell people this often. Especially in light of people like, defund the police and, blah, blah, blah. Look, without the buffer of law enforcement, this would be chaos, right? It would be.
That's the thin blue line, right?
Yeah.
The line between chaos and law and order.
Yeah, because there's no shot that average citizens are going to patrol streets and have the Constitution to deal with that.
No, it's not.
Especially I say this often too, like when you see neighborhoods that are, they're being overran, and then you're going to defund the police. You're allowing the opportunists to move in and do worse shit by a mile.
Who's the most against that is minorities living in those neighborhoods that want to live a normal life,
right,
and want their kids to go to school and want to just do normal stuff. They're the ones that don't want any of this crap, right? They want more police, they don't want less,
right?
But it's just the apologists for criminal activity that are behind that.
Yeah, it's I don't know. The road ahead's it's a shady one right now because the people joining law enforcement, that number is not as big as it used to be. Not even close.
I know. It's all a cycle, right? In the '60s, we had all these things like this that they were all suspect centered and all this kind of crap. And then it went away, and now we're back to that again, right? It's just out of control.
I remember being a kid and thinking, this is how naive I was. I remember being a kid thinking, by the time I'm in my 40s, racism won't even be a thought anymore. Because I saw the culture of the way life was when I was a kid. Thought for certain there would be no such thing as a hatred race crime. It would make no sense. We're evolving. And the only thing that's really evolving is our technology, not us.
Yeah.
It's sad to say that, you know?
Yeah, it is. But, sometimes some people use that to their advantage and want to pretend that things are worse than they are so they can hit for whatever political purposes. And that's happening a lot too.
Yeah, there's a lot of these figureheads. They're very manipulative. They're self-serving. And, unfortunately, they get to the helm of these religious pacts, and that's where they really have the power. Because now you're mixing faith with manipulation. Nobody has a chance against that, right? You got to be able to really see through it.
Absolutely.
That's why I tell people, like, look, it's good to have faith, but don't have blind faith, because blind faith flies into buildings. We've seen this,
Absolutely. You're exactly right.
So for you moving forward, let me ask, Cloyd, what do you got on the table? What are your plans? Because I always...
I don't know. I get called all the time. People ask me to do things like this all the time.
Right.
I just, my toes still in the water. It's not what I necessarily planned to do when I retired, but I've just found myself in this big true crime thing, and that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever considered being like a private detective?
Well, I actually am licensed to be a private investigator.
I knew it. I knew it.
And ask me, would you look into this? I don't do that. And I thought, maybe I should just do that. So I am a licensed private investigator. I don't do like fidelity cases or any of that crap. I just do, missing persons and death investigations and stuff like that. And so again, I have my company is called Seamus Investigations. I have a website, SeamusInvestigations.com. But I look into stuff all the time, but I'm not. I have a limited things I'll do.
Right. Well, missing persons, that's a big one because people want closure.
Because people, and I can't promise I'll find people, but people want to know what's going on with their missing person. A lot of, like 99. When I was working as a detective, we had missing person cases, and they were attached to our unit. And 99.9% of them would resolve themselves. The person would show up.
Right.
But there's that 1.1% that they don't. And so people need to know what's going on and someone with experience and an advocate. And I do that. Although, I don't encourage, if somebody calls me, I tell them, don't waste your money on me because I can only do so much.
Right.
I don't have any special powers. I can figure out what's going on and try to help you out, but that's as best I can do. I'm not taking people's money to just scam them and get the money to do stuff when not deliver at the other end.
Let's say you had unlimited resources, right? Like you had a foundation throwing resources at your capital, equipment. What would be some of the cases you would want to tackle?
Well, again, there's a lot of them. But the thing is, there's a lot of cases where people just don't know what happened to their loved ones. And I'm glad to look into that. But, I can't really answer that question because I don't want to. The thing is, with most of these people, the police are really doing everything they can. Sometimes people don't believe that, but they usually are, and that's what I would look at. And I can't put, just pull something out of thin air. And
missing persons. I think for me, that could be frustrating because some people electively.
It's really frustrating for the families of these people that their loved one left and disappeared in thin air. And so and I understand, I have empathy to that. Again, I'm not going to just take people's money and say, I can find your loved one because I may not be able to. And so that's the thing. I'm the worst kind of guy for this because I don't like charging people money to do stuff, right? Yeah. But I just don't.
Yeah, but to have resources, you got to have to. You know what I mean? Because
you have to. Yeah, I pay for databases that I have that I can search people for and other things. But yeah, it's just it's tough. It's tough because I understand. There's the only thing worse than losing a loved one is not knowing what happened to your loved one.
Right.
So, they disappeared off the face of the earth. They haven't heard anything, and I understand that. So I'm not gonna take advantage of those people to make a couple bucks.
There's this channel on YouTube I came across about a year ago. It's where these guys go out in boats and they find like cars and skeletal remains that are under the water from some unresolved cases. I can't remember the name of the channel off the top of my head. I'll have to get it for you. But even that intrigued me. I'm like, I'd never considered that. Like, how many bodies of water are in this country that are large? And some even
you
small.
have to have a reason to believe something's down there to begin with, too.
Right.
Right? You're not just picking it. If you're just picking areas at random and diving, you'll just be wasting your time. You'll never find anything.
Right. Well, these guys are basing it on last known locations and
Right, yeah, and they find there's a lake up in the Olympic Mountains near me where they find these cars that have been there for 70 years. These people disappeared in the middle of the night, and somebody finds a car there. Crescent Lake is named. It's a glacier-fed lake, and it's crystal clear, but it's deep. And every now and then, they snag a car or a person who's been missing for years and years and years. And the thing is, and this is on the route they would have taken, but how much can you search, right? I mean,
right.
you could submarine the water and go that whole route, or you have to have a reason to search an area. And why, and if you have a reason, why did the detectives investigating it originally have that reason? Maybe new information come up. I don't know. But those are tough cases, very tough. Tough on the detective and even more tough on the family members.
Yeah, I'm going to start reading because there's another one too, Lake Mead. The water levels.
Yeah, wow. As the water level went down, they found all these people in there by Las Vegas. Yeah, absolutely, by Hoover Dam.
That is
exactly, because that's the way it is. These things don't give up, but when sometimes the water goes way down for whatever reason, and things show up, but yeah, it's not easy.
That's a scary thought. I mean, it's something like bodies. When you see the word bodies, plural, like, wow. And then you hear where it's located, you're like, all right, undoubtedly. A lot of those could maybe be from like the gangster era, right?
Absolutely. Just outside Las Vegas. Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Yeah. I mean, undoubtedly it's got to be some gangster related stuff because there's no way a serial killer is going to put that many bodies in one location, right? And I don't know. But then again, at the end of the day, you got to consider like gangsters are probably they're serial killers. They just get paid.
Well, they are in the sense of the definition of serial killer, 2 or more murders with a recovery time between each one. That's the answer, and they are right. So most of that stuff is long gone, but historically it's happened.
Yeah, I mean that happened in I forget what's in New York some point in time. I think in the 80s they were making a new building and they found bodies underneath the old building, like a lot of them.
Yeah, that happens. It happens all the time, actually.
That's why that's nuts. And right under I don't remember who it was, but someone said, in the city it'd be hard to hide a bunch of bodies. Like, really? I don't think so, because these guys did it.
Really. No, not really. Yeah. There's spots all over, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think people associate bodies being found in like, vast open places, and it's just not the case, like there's some examples popping up now. So that Lake Mead, I don't know how they're going to approach that, because how do you approach a homicide that's that old?
Well, the thing is, the chances are good that the person that did it is long dead.
Right.
So really only just record keeping at this point. You're not going to try. I mean, you can try. Sometimes they have enough information the person's missing under suspicious circumstances, but really it's just a matter of historical record keeping at this point.
Yeah, because and not only that, but like, maybe some closure to a family, because you're probably right. That guy's long gone. Long gone.
And most of the family that knew the victim are long gone too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not all the time, but most of the time.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, Cloyd, before we close out, go ahead and mention your website again and any other your books, anything you want people to find, I'll put in description as well.
Well, I have a website, CloydSteiger.com, CloydSteiger.com. That's my website for my books and stuff, and I post some blog stuff there every now and then. I have 2 books out right now, Homicide, The View from Inside the Yellow Tape, which is basically I tell about my career in homicide, and then another one called Seattle's Forgotten Serial Killer, Gary Jean Grant, which is a case I had nothing to do with long before I was on, but somebody asked me to write it, so I did. And then my private investigation website is Shamus, SHAMUS, investigations.com. And if somebody's looking for a private investigator, again, I'm not going to take a case to take your money, and if I think it's a waste of your time, I'll tell you right up front. But that's the thing. Those are my sites. That's what I'm doing, and I'm again on YouTube. I'm on the internet. I'm everywhere.
Gotcha. And I'll put all that in the description for anyone to find. In the meantime, I'm going to say good night, good evening, or good day to wherever it is, whoever's listening, and I'm going to talk to Cloyd in post.
All right. Thanks.